Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Every Arkansan podcast. I'm Drew Davis, and this week we've got Thelma Moton. Thelma is special and dear to my heart because when I got the dream of starting the Dream Center, I went straight to her. I hope her story inspires you to chase your God-given dream. Well, Miss Thelma, thank you so much for taking the time. You've been someone that poured into me in the early years. Your husband fed me for a lot of years, went to school with your son, so we go way back.
Way back.
Just share a little bit about where you came from.
Well, Drew, when you're asking me to talk about where did I come from and my little story, it takes me all the way back up into the hills, kind of the lower Ozarks. Twin Groves. You guys call it Twin Groves. But it was called Damascus when I grew up. And I grew up there, one of 12 children, number 11, and was determined that there was more to life than what I was seeing there. Although my parents were great providers, you know, we were still sharecroppers, and we worked hard. We picked a lot of cotton. My parents raised cucumbers. And so you know what I was doing in the summer months, picking cucumbers, but I just realized that there was more to life than what was there. And long story short, I left when integration happened. We were at the segregated schools of Pine Street. And when integration happened, we were to go to Guy Perkins. Okay. And at that point, I moved to Michigan to live with a brother. And I was there for a year or so. And because of a difficult marriage, their marriage, I returned back to Guy Perkins. And at that time, it was still difficult, you know, that blending of cultures and ethnicities and all of that. And I just felt the pressure. And Drew, I just told my parents, you know, guys, if you guys don't let me out of this, I'm just going to drop out. So I talked to the superintendent and I said, there's a girl here that's doing the 11th and 12th grade together. And I want to do that. And he said, I couldn't. And I said, well, if you're allowing her to do that, why can't I do that? And he couldn't give me an answer, but he was refusing to let me do that. And so my dad is always up for a challenge. And I went home and I said, Papa, he's letting this girl do this, but he said, I can't. And Daddy went over, Papa went over, and we had a conversation. So I ended up doing the 11th and 12th grade together, graduating high school at 16. And Drew, looking back, I know it was God's grace. I would never want my child to do that. I graduated not with a real vision. No one in my family had gone to college. Mm-hmm. And I just knew I wanted something more. And there was a girl in our community. Her name was Future. Isn't that something? And she had gone to Philander Smith College. And I said, you know what? I'm going to walk in her path. I didn't know how to get to Philander Smith. There was no guidance counselors to say that's not where you need to be. You're poor. So I went. I left at 16 and moved here to Little Rock. And I went to college there and was there for a year and realized that I was struggling. I was a great student academically, but I was struggling. I had to work 40 hours and go here. And so I ended up back at UCA. And things were just not good in my life. I was on a track. I was in a downward spiral. I'm a loyal person. And I was in a relationship that was not good. And I knew the only way for me to leave that relationship, I needed to leave here. So I moved to California and lived with a sister. And it was probably the best thing God led me in my life because I knew Jesus. Mm-hmm. You know, I grew up in church. We went beans, cornbread, picking cotton in church. I knew church. But the relationship where Jesus was guiding my life, it didn't happen for me. And I think that was part of the reason I made some poor decisions that drove me to do what I'm doing today. But it was in California that I fell in love with Jesus Christ, fell in love with him. I came up under the tutelage of Dr. John MacArthur, who is the pastor of Grace Community Church still today, and fell in love with the Word of God. And he captured me. And I started to walk in righteousness, wrapped in his righteousness. And just my life just took on this whole thing because, oh my God, my goal was to never be married because I saw bad marriages in my family. Mm-hmm. I didn't want children. So I was going to be rich and travel. And in California, when I went, I was on that track. Mm-hmm. And when I fell in love with the Lord started showing me a different purpose. Now, I'm talking now in those terms. I didn't know that's what he was telling me there.
Right.
And so long story short, my husband and I made a decision. We both were making very, very good money. My husband worked for the LAPD, also was a hairstylist. And I worked for the city of Los Angeles, but I also sold real estate and had a clothing boutique. So we were doing really well. The Lord captured my heart one night. Drew, this is amazing. I was on the freeway going home, and the Lord just showed me that as long as you do this, Danny, which is my husband, is never going to understand his role of being the leader financially or spiritually. And I was saying, are you saying that I'm not to work? And to make a long story short, I went home and I told my husband, I said, you know what? I'm going to just let you be the, and he goes, Thelma, do you know what you're saying? And so I did. Dandrick had been born, our firstborn. And I looked at him, and a babysitter was raising my child. And I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to raise our children. And my husband had been married prior to me. And so we had some of his kids. And scared the hell out of us, really did. And then he looked at me and he said, do you realize what this means? And I said, yeah. I said, you know, the little apartment above our business, if that means we've got to move into that in order for me to be in the perfect will of God, I'll do that. And he tells the story now. He said he thought, my wife has lost her mind. And through that process, Drew, we almost lost our home. We lost our Mercedes. We had to give it up. Some of the other properties we had. And there were times when we didn't know how we were going to pay the light bill. But it was through that process I grew. My dependence on the Lord, it was just incredible. And we came home to visit during that time of difficulties. And I remember Danny, my husband, going on a route with my brother-in-law, Vernon. He was into construction. And I remember my husband saying, where are the food trucks? And so he said, what are you talking about? He said, well, how do you feed your crew? He said, well, at lunchtime, somebody goes to pick the lunch up. And he said, wow. So he came back. I was up in Damascus. And he said, honey, they don't have any food trucks here. He said, you know, why don't we consider that? I said, honey, this is Arkansas. And they don't know nothing about this. Still, you know, things are still not the way you think they are. I said, let's go back home. Let's start praying about that and see. So I said, let's just see what God does. And so I had become a member of Grace Community Church. I had people praying for us because I knew that I needed to know that this is what God wanted. So I said, honey, let's just see if the business sells. And let's see if we can lease our home because we can't sell. We lived out in the valley. We lived in Granada Hills in San Fernando Valley. And there's no way we're going to be able to afford to come back here if things don't work. So I said, let's not sell, let's lease. And if we can lease our house, if you can sell your business, we can see if this is what God is doing. Drew, I kid you not. We put that place up for sale, his business. And in 30 days, that doesn't happen on Washington and Weston in LA. And then someone said they were interested in our house. And so I said, okay, let's see. I said, well, then let me see in Arkansas what's going on about food trucks. So I called the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Chamber, and they said, the only thing we know about is up in Fort Smith. So I said, well, Danny, you don't know anything about a food truck. So he said, let me take some runs with some Hispanics. That was a big business in LA. So he started doing the route. And he said, you know what? I think I could do this. And so we did that. We sold the business, leased our home, moved here, moved to Arkansas. God opened doors that your dad was one of those factories. The bus company, Ward's Bus Company, people started to see the value of their employees not leaving and being able to get breakfast and lunch, especially in hot time. You know, those factories were hot with no air conditioning. So some workers weren't coming back to work. But by us being there, they could come and go back. So God just tremendously. And this story can get detailed, so I'm going to jump around. And so it was during that time that I was at a small church that was my family was drowning and we were not growing, but God had me there for a purpose. And I remember one day saying, God, I cannot believe you moved me from here to here. And because my family is drowning and this cannot be where that I'm supposed to be. And so I got up and went around the church building. And as I was walking into the back of that church building, it came just as clear as a bell to me. Who do you think you are? I have you here for a purpose. This is a mission field. And I went, oh, goodness. So I called back to Grace Community Church and I said, what do you think the Lord might be saying? Because I'm not growing, my family's not growing, they're not excited about church. And the guy that was leading, his name was John, and he said, Thelma, this might be the mission field for you. Why don't you see it as a mission field versus a burden? So I started looking around and I saw these women who were just going to church. And I can remember that was my mindset back in the day. I was just going to church. So I said to those 5 girls, I said, listen to me. There's more to your Christian life than just going to church. There's a community out here. And there's a place that we need to pour into. I said, so why don't you guys join me? Let's each one of us take 3 little girls in our area and let's just start meeting with them once a week. And they said, okay. And I challenged their faith. I said, what do you know about Jesus? Why don't you find out who Jesus really is? So a couple of those girls gave their hearts to Jesus. They're growing to this day. So those 5 and me started meeting with these little girls. That was in 1991. By 1992, that 15 grew to 52. And a lady at Conway Junior High said, whatever you're doing, y'all need to do this in the public schools because these kids, I can see a difference. Their friends need to hear. And I said, I don't have a desire to go to public school, so if you can make that happen. So she talked to a principal and he said, give us one day shot at it. So we did. We went in through career orientation. And that little corps, volunteer corps of us, we went in and this is what we told the kids. Drew, we said, these are topics that we covered. There's life beyond the 8th and 9th grade. Choices have consequences that you can't always direct. Just things like that, basic life skills. And telling our story. How when I left home, a great kid, and walked into college, and because I didn't have a guidance and a vision, I allowed myself to be in situations that put me in a downward spiral, and I share my story. And these little girls was going, wow, that's me. And they would come back and knock on the door and say, Miss Moton, can you talk to my friend? And it started like that. And I got a call 2 weeks later from the principal. And he said, I need you to come to my office. He said, we need to talk. And I'm thinking, okay, we probably stepped over the line here. And he said, Thelma, I've never had a program in my school that have received this kind of response. And he said, Drew, he said, and if you want to come back, you got to do something for my boys. And I'm thinking, I didn't know I was coming back, and I don't have anything for boys. But I saw an opportunity. So I called 3 guys that you probably know, Harold Nash, Bron Brown, who was running K-Life at that time, and Marvin Delph. And I said, come here. I said, listen to me. You have a God-given responsibility to help me. I said, they're saying for us to do something for guys, and I want you to develop a presentation out of your life experiences, and let's go back into the schools. Long story short, we did that. And it was amazing. I got a call from a guy down here in Little Rock from Family Council called Jerry Cox. And he said, I got a newsletter here that a parent have shared with me what you're doing up there. And we put that in our newsletter. And we've gotten a call from Focus on the Family in Colorado. He said, Dr. James Dobson, folks wants to talk with you. You and another organization out of Illinois. He said, because there's some funding going down that you need to be aware of. And I said, well, I'm not interested in funding. We're doing this by volunteer. He said, yeah, but you need to talk to. I said, okay, let's do a conference call. Didn't know what a conference call was. So Fellowship Bible Church, at that point, is where I was a member. I had become a member of Fellowship Bible Church. So we used their facility, and they were the only church at that point that was assisting me financially. And I had a call with Peter Brandt from Focus on the Family. And he said, there's some funding. Some senator in South Carolina, or one of the Carolinas, had written it looks like they have looked at your mission statement and the mission statement of this organization and written this legislation. And we need you to apply for these funds. And I said, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the government being a part of what I do. I don't know how to write grants. I'm not interested in expanding. This is what I do. And so I left it alone. I did. I knew we needed some more, but I didn't know where that was coming from. And Fellowship Bible Church had given me my first little $12,000, and I was about raising the money. And I met a young man by the name of you know him. I don't know if I can say his name, but his last name is Stockdale. And his family and I, we knew each other. And I went to him and I said to him, I said, I need someone to run this portion of the program because I still wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but I wanted to volunteer. And all I have is $12,500. And I know you have a wife and 4 daughters, but I promise you I will do whatever I can to raise your salary. They prayed. They took on that task. And I was raising their salary. And my husband and I were in business, but we never wrote a check, ever. Every Tuesday, his payroll was due, and we made it. By the grace of God, I'd go to the post office and something would be there. So, but this funding was there, available. And I had said no to it. But we all from Fellowship Bible Church at some point, a group of us would take our kids out toward Hot Springs for an Easter retreat. I sat on a bench that morning and I went to read, and I started reading the life of Nehemiah. And I thought, wow, Nehemiah's heart was so broken. He went before the king at risk, allowed his countenance to be seen, and the king asked, what's going on? And he said, the walls of Jerusalem are broken, and the whole story. You know that story. And the king basically said, I'll fund it. And I went, that was government money. King's money was tax dollars. And the Lord spoke to my heart, Thelma, it's not the government's money. The earth is mine and the fullness thereof. It is how it's used. And so I thought, are you asking? So I came back and I went, is that what you're saying? Because I don't know anything about this. And isn't it amazing how you can be so ignorant and dumb? And God said, that's just how I want you. And so I called up Mike Huckabee. I had worked on his campaign for a little bit, and I said, okay, there's some funding and I don't understand it all, but the government has some money and it has to be matched by the state. And he said, I don't know if I can make that happen. I said, well, I don't know how to make it happen. It said it needs to be matched by the state. And so he said, see if there's some interest. So we did. We pulled together a group of people and they said they were interested, got their signatures. And I called up Governor Huckabee and I said, we got these signatures. He said, well, let me look into it. We bought the first $660,000 to the state of Arkansas through the legislative, and I don't know how Mike did it. They matched it with $443,000. So we bought the first $1 million, and I said, okay. And then I had to write for a grant for that money. And that's how I was able to expand what we do. And people start calling me from Fort Smith, from Cabot, from Greenbrier to say, what are you doing in the schools that's getting this kind of support? And I said, we're just training people to go into the schools and to share their hearts and to help our kids understand that there's more to life than this. And we just started expanding that way. And it was through that funding that I was able to expand what we do. And to this day, we still depend largely on God's dollars through government funding. And we now serve 8 counties in the state. We're serving in excess of 8,000 kids a year. We just expanded to the Delta. And that's where we are. Conway Public Schools have just been incredible. We serve all of the junior high, middle schools of outreach to parents kids who just need help, teen moms, pregnant moms who just can't find their way. So I have in-home visitors that go in and give resources to these moms, help them to understand the importance of continued education to break the cycle. We're just getting ready to kick off a fatherhood initiative because as I was talking to a group of folks last week, what we're doing in the schools, and Drew, we're dealing with the fruit, with kids who are struggling. We've got to do something about the root. And fathers are at the root of this thing. And the lack of fatherhood, the lack of fathers understanding their role. And I can't point the finger, we've got to give them guidance. And so we're getting ready to kick off fatherhood. So it has just expanded from just 5 little girls to over 8,000. And I travel throughout the United States right now, certifying other organizations like me who I didn't have that understanding what data meant, how important it is to capture that data, how important it is to say research-based, to make sure that, if you don't document it, it didn't happen in the eyes of many. I didn't know that. All I knew is what I was doing, what God called me to do. And so that's what I do. That's who we are. And there's a place for every single person in the community, Drew, every single person to do their little part. Our kids are drowning. Our single parents are doing a good job. Some of them are doing a great, great job. But these single parents need support. And they need the help really of men to step into the lives of their men, their young boys, but also their young girls. They need to see the support of a healthy man. They need to see what a healthy marriage looks, not just marriage. They need to see healthy marriages. And so that's what I'm about now is recruiting and empowering and walking alongside. And so that's where we are. I have 11 employees. I have a staff of probably about 30 contractual people across the state who we support and encourage. And that's how we started, from the little girl from Twin Groves who sat on the back porch to say there's more to life than this. And God has just guided me. You know, it's kind of like what God said to Abraham. Abraham go, what? Leave? Go where? And he's, where? And he said, as you're going, I'll show you. And it's been my life story. I wake up some days I go, God, how am I going to do this? And it reminds me, you're not. I'm doing it. And as you're going, I'll show you. And just Drew, there are times when I didn't know how we were going to make it, even with the grants, because grants come and go. That's soft money.
Right.
You know, it dries up. And I remember once, only the 2 girls that's handling my books knew, and they didn't know the depth of where we were. And I remember saying, God, we need $10,000. And I don't know where to get that from. And so I told the girls, I said, search those books and find out, is there any way we can move money from one line item up to another to take care of this immediate need? And I remember on December 31st, one of the girls came to the house and said, we have looked at every line item and there's no wiggle room. And I said, okay, well, we'll just have to see what happens. She left my house at 8:30. Never will forget how I know is because I texted her at 8:36. I said, when you walked out of the house, I got a phone call from a lady, and she said, I'm calling because we're at the end of the year, and we need to know where to move some money. She said, could you use $10,000? And when I called her, I said, this is the number that she said, are you kidding me? And that's what God has done. I was at another state speaking 2 years ago. Went back to the hotel room and I realized summer camp was coming. And I was thinking, I don't know how we're going to do this year because we had turned down some government assistance. And I got a text from a friend of mine. And she said, if you make sure this stays anonymous, I want to know, can you use $8,000? And I said, are you kidding me? And I told her what we were doing. And she said, we're going to do that. We came into some money and we know what you do. And so we're going to do that. But when the check came, it was $10,000. And that's what God has done, Drew. Mm-hmm. He takes care of our needs even before sometimes we know we need it. And he's put me in a place where I'm just totally dependent on him, even with these grants. I'm not a grant writer, Drew. I am the worst. I'm not. I can sell you anything verbally. I can sell the Pope. But writing, that's not my skill set. And I remember, Drew, we got this grant, our first $349,000 grant. This is 5-year funding. And, you know, they send you your strengths and your weaknesses. And we said, congratulations, you know, da-da-da-da-da. And it said in the weaknesses, this is a very poorly written grant.
Still funded it.
But still funded it. And I thought, God, you are incredible. You know, he talks about, he takes the weaknesses of us to manifest who he is. I'm a living witness of God doing what he can do through a weak vessel. And when I think, I can almost come to tears thinking, just saying this to you, when I think that God would use somebody like me to be a part of his business, when he could use somebody so much more educated, so much more capable, but he chooses a little Black woman with no real background to say, you know what, you be a conduit and keep yourself at a place where I can pour through you. And that's where I am.
And I mean, I think one of the things that explains a lot to me, because I grew up with your son Dandrick, is seeing the man that he was and the gentleman that he was. That's a testament to you making that sacrifice years ago of saying, I'm going to be in his life and not just raised by a nanny or a babysitter or whatever. So,
Drew, when you call out his name, I remember when he was in high school, he and Ruel Shepard and Lee Stewart and Nathan Tomlinson, all those guys, they became our first stand-up peer leadership team. And then when Dandrick graduated, I got him a internship. I'm not going to tell you where, but it was here in the city. And I remember him saying, Mom, there are people out here that don't believe in what you're doing. And they really don't believe that a Black man can take the stand that you are promoting. And we're promoting delaying intimacy and premarital intimacies until marriage. And he said, there are people here that don't believe that. And he said, when I graduate, I want to work for you, and I want to show that this is possible. And I said, well, you might come work for me, baby. Mama can't pay you. And so he did that. And I remember when he came aboard and we got that grant, I was able to pay him a little bit. But I remember getting a call from Washington, D.C., and they were saying President Bush was in office. And they were asking me to serve on the PACHA committee for him. And it was about AIDS and HIV. And I said, I will, but I'm thinking I would like for you to consider my son. I said, he's 25, he's very articulate. And they said, I said, but I really would. And they did that. He was the youngest ever, 25, first African-American to go to D.C. He's got his little picture with President Bush. And I remember them saying, he stood up by President Bush and said, you're a real little short man. Because that's Dandrick. But I remember he called me one day. He said, Mom, I don't know what the heck I'm doing up here. He went in the hallway and he said, Mom, I'm sitting by people who are running Walgreens and they're flying themselves in. And I'm all these people. I don't know what to say at these meetings. I said, I don't want you to say anything, Dandrick. I want you to be a big ear. I said, because you're there for a purpose and you be a big ear. And when your time comes, God's going to empower you. In 3 months, Dandrick was heading committees. Speaking in life into those people. And Dandrick, right to this day, is a major reason. When God took him at the age of 33, I just thought, God, what in the world? Dandrick had never been sick. But 33 years, Dandrick walked in purpose. Didn't always get it right. I'm not telling you my son was perfect, but he walked in purpose. And the youth organization that's a part of who we are now was one of his brainchilds. And it is so when you mention his name, I tell young people all the time, you think you can put off living because you think you have time. If Dandrick had put off living from a teenager to thinking he was going to wait till he graduated, look what we would have missed. In 33 short years, that, I'm telling you, it's amazing. And if you go to excelsports.org, when he moved from here and went to Arizona, he called me one day after he got his master's and he said, you know what? I'm going to put some of that character education into an organization he developed called excelsports.org. Biggest sports program in the Valley of Phoenix. To this day, it's still going because the guys that he poured into said, we're not going to let it die. So yeah, God did so much through the organization, but he did so much for my kids. My girls to this day work with me. It's just amazing what God has done, and he's still not finished. I keep thinking, I look at people around me retiring, and I'm going, is my time up? Is it? And God said, no. And I still have a passion for what we do because there's so many communities and so many churches. There's so much to do on their streets. There's so much to do in their schools. And when I go into the schools, the church is not there. I shouldn't be dependent on the government. I really shouldn't be, Drew, for what we do. I shouldn't be. The churches should be funding this because I have a place, a mission field for each church to be able to walk into there and have lunch with kids, spend time with kids, let kids know that they matter. The church should be funding this.
And that one of the things that I learned early on from you is when you do get into government funding, you got to kind of play both sides, but the importance of keeping Jesus front and center. So even in your life lessons, you just took a core principle of God and rewrote it without the reference.
That's it. That's it. Truth is truth.
Yeah. And how important that is, especially young men and young women that are making those important decisions that unfortunately so many of them make the wrong one and it's hard to come back.
It is.
Even at a young age.
It is.
But to have those in there because it's the word I've hidden in my heart that I might not sin against thee. And it's just so powerful. And then just your heart, because I grew up in Conway. That was home to me, and seeing so much. And I graduated right after you had kind of started this, and just the stories that come out. What are some of the things that, because I always tell my staff, at least once a week, I'm ready to quit.
I know.
What are some of those stories of some of those kids that you've seen that just like, that's what you fall back on?
I'm going to give you two recent ones, okay? Two real recent ones. I had a young man that was in our program, and he was going through summer camp. And I remember, so we try to recruit kids like in the 8th grade to raise them up on our leadership team to get them ready to be peer presenters. And he was one of those children that was on the right track. In the 8th grade, he came to one of our directors and said, I'm going to drop out because I feel like a hypocrite. And they said, what do you mean you feel like a hypocrite? Everything we're standing for, my family doesn't. My mom's never been married. My sister's not married. They have kids. And here I am. And so the director said, so what does that have to do with you? Why are you letting that dictate? He said, because I feel like a hypocrite. So she said to him, first of all, we're not letting you quit. And you're going to stay on the team. So he did, reluctantly. 10th grade, he became the president of the leadership team. Then he got ready to graduate high school. I got to tell you this, I love this. He said, I'm not going to college because that's not happened. So again, why are you letting what hadn't happened determine who you are? So that's what we're going to do for you. We're going to get you a book stipend. We're going to find some money for you. And we want you to drive down the street to Marlton and go to a 2-year college. At least when you leave there, you'll have a degree. And you know, it's not going to be as expensive if you go. So let's just help you do that. So he reluctantly did that. Went down there for 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, Drew, he said, I think I'm going to give a shot at UCA. Went to UCA. I got a call in December. I want you to be at my graduation. Graduated from UCA, and today he is a faculty member at a charter school right here in Little Rock.
Awesome.
That's what keeps me going. Leadership team. We take them every couple times a year on a summit, trying to get them ready to go. Came back 3 weeks ago. This is October, so it was like September 15th. I got back from the retreat. All on fire, because you know when you take kids away on the summit, you get all motivated and all that. So I came back and I'm just thinking, oh, this is wonderful. Get a text from my kid who graduated, single parent, at one point was living in a car. We kept him on that leadership team because those are the kind of kids you really want to show. You've got something, you got some resilience to make. Right. He went to Missouri on a football scholarship. Said, I need to call you and I need to tell you that where I am today, it's because you guys poured into me on the leadership team. And I want you to know that I'm graduating in May with a 3-point plus. And thank you for that. That was that one. Then I get a text from a young man who just graduated, and he's at the U of A. And he said, I just got back from a leadership summit at the U. He said, while I'm sitting there, I realized that all this stuff they're teaching me, I already know. And he said, and I'm a leg up. Thank you, Miss Moton. Those are the things that keep me here. Or when I walk into a doctor's office, Drew, and the nurse's assistant comes out and goes, oh, Miss Moton, I'm so glad you're here. I so wanted to let you know how well I've done. I was in your first teen mom program at Conway High School, upstairs in the rocking chair. And she said, I'm here today because you believed in me. I wanted you to see me, and here you are. So that's what keeps me. It keeps me doing what I do because, Drew, I say this all the time, and I said, God, I'm saying it. Can you make me feel it? This is not about me. We're kingdom building. We're getting people ready for the kingdom. And although I can't say, confess your sins, he's faithful and he's just, I can say you can have someone to pour your heart out to. Todd Gormley, and I know they don't mind me saying it, but Mimi Gormley was with me for years going into the schools. And I remember saying to Mimi one day, I said, Mimi, I feel like I'm missing my calling because we can only take these kids right here. And I know that what they really need is the gospel of Jesus Christ. But I can't do that because I've got to stay within what I said. And she said to me, Thelma, how do you know that what we're teaching these kids truth? We're teaching the truth. Truth is truth. And it's based on the principles of God. She said, how do you know that what you're doing is you're not keeping hearts soft so that somebody else can come along and plant the real gospel because they can receive it because their hearts are still soft to truth. So you can see yourself kind of as breaking the ground. And I went, ah. That's what I see myself and all my staff. We're here making sure kids understand what negative consequences are, what positive consequences are, and how you can make the choice. The choice is yours. And then, even though it sounds simple, and then, it's one thing to tell a kid what not to do or what to do. You need to, when I tell a kid that this is not right, we need to show them what is right. And then we need to show them how to do what's right. And then we need to show them incrementally how to get there. And that takes relationships. Because I'm going to tell you, Drew, listen to me. Information void of relationships does very little for behavioral change. Yeah. You can have an information dump, they can get that anywhere, but you got to have somebody to walk alongside these kids, hand in glove, to say, okay, so what, you messed up, let's try it again, Never give up on them. Right. They go to jail, we show up. We find a way to go visit them while they're in juvie, They're up at ALE, long-term alternative, you bet you my staff is up there twice a week. I don't care where you go. We're going to be there for you because we believe that you can do better. And so I wish I had bought the statistics from last year of how many who graduated from ALE. And we have a couple of them in the Air Force. We got one of them on a tennis scholarship. Can you think of a black boy on a tennis scholarship? Yeah. He said he wanted to play tennis. And so the young man that works for me named Archie went over to Hendrix, talked to the tennis coach, and said, tell me what I need to do to get him where he needs to be. This boy's at college playing tennis right now. We've got kids who said, I just want to pass the test. Couldn't read hardly. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, and we call it Training for Purpose. That's our after school program. We walking those kids through those. I think we graduated, 6 or 7, and every single one of them, if they're not doing college, they're doing something that's bettering where they were. So that's what keeps me here. And there are times that I wake up going, God, this is tough. What are we doing, Lord? Are we really making a difference? One day I remember thinking, God, what am I doing? Sometimes kids are worse off than they were when we started. And I remember being told way, way back, you stay responsibility oriented. You leave the results to God. So that's what keeps me. You need to be responsible, Drew. I need to be responsible. The church need to be to do what God called us to do. It is the Holy Spirit's job for the results. And I'm a results-oriented person. Right. I'm going to tell you, I want to know, I've said this, okay, where's the results? And I might not see it until later. My mom prayed for all of us, but my brother was hell on wheels. You understand me? I mean, literally. My mom prayed, never saw that boy, never saw him turn. My mom's been gone since 92. 5 years ago, my brother, who's 9, his birthday is tomorrow, will be 84. My brother, at the age of 80, in his bedroom, cried out to the Lord for forgiveness. When anybody see him, everybody knew him. They look at him now and go, who is that? And he will just cry saying, why did I waste all my life? That's what I'm trying to tell you is my mom didn't see the results. But my mom was responsible to do what God called her to do as a mom. And that's what we as individuals, we have to be responsible in our sphere of influence, whether we see results or not, because God is responsible for the results. So I remind myself, I have to do self-talk. I remind myself of that.
It's been great. And what's the best way for someone that hears this and says, I want to get involved, I want to see this in my community or whatever. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
You go to our website, choosingtoexcel.org, and there's a place for volunteers or for more information. Go in there and it goes right to my staff and they get what I need to come to me, and we can connect with people. That was choosingtoexcel.org, and go to our website.
And I want to just make note, when I started this whole mess that I do, I came to you.
Yeah, I know.
You're not just about building your organization. No. You're about building the kingdom and anyone that wants to get out there. So I just want to put that out there for people that are looking at this and they're saying, well, I'd like that in my community. I'm nowhere near that. But there's resources.
That's resources. And if we can't, what you just said, that I just have a passion for collaboration. We this ownership thing, do what you do and help others do what they do. And, and where we can collaborate, let's do that. And so I'm big on assisting others and just letting them come and talk to me. and just hear themselves out, and I can encourage as much as possible because we all got a work to do. God's gifted you, He's gifted me, and He's got a place for us. Dr. Vernon McGee said, you don't even know who that is, but Dr. Vernon McGee said, I remember as a little girl saying, if God gifted you and if God called you, He's got a place for you. And that's what keeps me. I don't have to worry about doing what you do because you do this well. You don't have to worry about what I do. Mm-hmm. We just need to work together and support each other. Yeah.
So just want to say thank you for a lot of things. Your husband fed me and kept me alive a lot of years when my dad had me sweating in the factory.
I know.
Your son was a blessing to know all through high school, and just his heart. And then, those other boys you mentioned that were his friends. Raul was an amazing young man. His dad still is doing amazing things. Tummelson, all of them. So thank you for them, and thank you for you and what you've done for at least my hometown in particular, and so many others.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
So, hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Every Arkansan podcast. Thelma Moton, like I said in the beginning, is very special to me. Her heart and her passion for the kids of Arkansas is amazing. She gave up so much to move back here and to change lives. I hope it inspires you for what you can do for every Arkansan.